Senator Rick Scott was interviewed on CNN about whether he does actually want to cut Social Security and Medicare. Let's watch.
The fact that the president is now using this as an attack line, was it a mistake to propose this?
No. First off, nobody believes that I want to cut Medicare or Social Security. I've never said it. I've never said it. In that same plan, I said Congress needs to once a year tell the American public how they're going to make sure those programs don't go bankrupt, because they're in the verge of bankrupts. And here's the difference between Joe Biden and me. I've never proposed it. In 1975, he has a bill, a sunset bill, and it says it requires every program to be looked at freshly at least every 4 years, not just cost, but worthiness. And, Caitlin, he said, when I argued that we should freeze federal spending, I meant Social Security as well. I meant Medicare, Medicaid, veterans benefits. I meant every single solitary thing in government. So here's the difference. I've never proposed it. He proposed it in the bill, and he fought for it year after year after year.
You're talking about what he proposed back in 1975, it was almost 50 years ago. But you have said he's twisting your words, but isn't that the same thing that what you're proposing now, what you rolled out last summer?
Mine says clear. Mine says clear. If it's worth keeping, we're going to keep it. In his case, okay, he proposed a bill to just sunset everything. I've never done that. I've been very clear. I am not for cutting Social Security, Medicare. That quote says he proposed it year after year after year to reduce Medicare and Social Security, year after year. I've never done that. I don't believe in that. I think we've got to preserve those benefits.
Caitlin Collins is doing really good work. I wonder if Don Lemon screamed at her after that interview.
Look, it's a good thing for Americans that everybody is now running away from their efforts to cut Social Security and Medicare. I talked about that Biden clip that he was quoting from. I quoted in my radar yesterday and played the audio of him making that quote in full. That was audio that Bernie used in a campaign ad against Joe Biden back in 2020 for exactly this reason, that a lot of people on both sides of the aisle have routinely suggested cutting these social programs that so many Americans rely on and which are very popular. But what we should learn from this, from both the Biden example and the Rick Scott example, is that everybody, all of these corporate hacks propose cutting Social Security, and they always do so through sneaky ways, like saying they're going to just reevaluate everything on an annual basis. We're going to sunset a huge block of policies without zeroing in on Social Security and Medicare specifically, hoping that it gets under the radar, hoping that the public doesn't notice, and that we all have to stay hyper vigilant. Because I think he's right. I don't think you can really trust Joe Biden to protect these programs any more than you can trust Rick Scott or the Republicans to. Everybody at some point has tried to take a bite out of this particular apple.
Yeah, I think to the point he's getting at there, Joe Biden tried to humiliate Republicans the other day for sometimes expressing and 10 years ago having much more of an appetite to cut these programs, and now Rick Scott is turning around and saying, well, so did Joe Biden.
You think Joe Biden was trying to humiliate conservatives last night?
No. He had the effect of humiliating them, pointing out hypocrisy on this issue. So Rick Scott's saying Joe Biden is also hypocritical on this issue.
I think that's completely fair, but let's be clear. Joe Biden, to his credit, said not all Republicans, he caveated the dickens out of it. He said not all Republicans, this is not a party consensus by any means. But some of you, not 50 years ago, but last week, have specifically said that you wanted to cut Social Security and Medicare.
I don't know how many people said it last week.
No, they did. And the lead up to midterms.
The Mike Lee clip that people pulled up, that was from 10 years ago.
Yeah, but I don't have to go back 10 years. I know for a fact, because it was reported on and talked about on the left by left media who talks about these things, not just because it makes a Republican look bad, but because we actually care about protecting these programs around midterms, where Republicans were clear that part of their strategy when they regained the House was going to be that they were going to hold up the debt ceiling specifically to have a war over Social Security and Medicare. This was widely reported in left media.
Aren't there some federal programs you would like to see just automatically sunset every couple of years?
No, we're talking about Social Security and Medicare. And those are programs that are overwhelmingly popular and that Republicans know they can't come out openly and say they want to cut. Democrats also know they cannot come out openly and say they want to cut them. Even though Democrats have tried to do so, including Barack Obama back in 2012. In 2016, there were a series of hit pieces on Bernie Sanders saying Bernie Sanders didn't respect our first black president and said he was going to primary him in 2012. Well, why did Bernie at that time float the idea that he might challenge Barack Obama in that race? Because Barack Obama was putting feelers out about cutting Social Security. And Bernie said, I will run against Barack Obama if he lays a finger on Social Security. So Barack Obama backed off to the threat. So again and again, this is not a partisan issue, but it is absolutely the case that most recently Republicans have put a target on Medicare and Social Security's back, and it is perfectly fair for Joe Biden to call that out. I do wish Democrats were in a better moral position here by having a candidate that had actually dedicated his career to protecting those programs instead of a Johnny-come-lately like Joe Biden, who now has decided it's politically advantageous to hit Republicans on this. I do think that it's deeply hypocritical.
Yeah, but there are federal programs I would love to see just automatically close off, and then we can decide if we really want the defense budget to be that high, if we really want grants to local law enforcement to buy tanks and things like that.
I think that even though I think that the defense budget needs to be dramatically reduced, I don't think that automatic kind of like routine adjustments to budgets that aren't tied to what actual needs are smart. I think that you should reduce budgets based on need. You should reduce budgets based on waste. You should reduce budgets based on a change in priorities.
I wish we would do that. We almost never do that.
Not just, oh, well, it's the end of the year and it's time to reduce the budget, so no matter what happens, no matter who suffers, no matter what allies are abandoned, or whatever happens.
Yeah. The budget's always bigger than it was the year before. We never give less money to any of these programs.
Well, we do. We cut budgets all the time. We cut the IRS budget. That's why we're in this.
That's the one example.
No, but that's exactly why we're in this place where we're talking about refunding the IRS. What the Democrats have proposed, what happened at the end of last year, was only returning it to the funding levels that existed 10, 15 years ago, when, I might add, billionaires were taxed at a much higher rate because they had the resources.
Rand Paul has proposed just returning our overall budget to the immediately before the pandemic rate, and that would have the effect of balancing it.
Right. And there are pandemic era policies that are in effect because people continue to be in economic crisis. Now, if you don't care, and if you say it doesn't matter if people are relying on these policies, it doesn't matter if it will cause this number of evictions, this number of people to lose access to health care, or this many people to have to go, sleep on the streets or whatever, then do it. But people cannot pretend that you can automatically just cut funding and like people don't rely on it. I mean, there are political consequences. Unfortunately, we live in a country where the people who pay those the consequences of those kinds of actions are disproportionately poor and they don't vote. So yeah, the government does routinely cut funding to policies that benefit the poor. We saw this child tax credit get dropped in April, even though it literally halved the number of children that lived in poverty in the United States of America. But what you're not going to see is any compromising on something like the repealing the Trump tax cuts. You saw that that SALT tax deduction had a bunch of Democrats and corporate Republicans out against it. You saw that Joe Manchin basically wouldn't pass Build Back Better, in part because there was all of this fight over maintaining corporate tax rates for the rich.
I mean, this is why we always spend beyond our means. Democrats don't really show any interest in cutting anything, and Republicans only show a selective, every now and then, interest in cutting only the things that are very popular.
Well, some Democrats do have an interest in cutting things like taxes for the rich and wealth tax. Not all Democrats, not enough Democrats to be sure. But even Biden, one of the things that he brought up in a State of the Union speech was this billionaires tax. There are only like 1,000 billionaires in the entire country. What does it say about our democracy? That there are a small cohort, like 1,000 billionaires, whose number, by the way, have grown like 30% in the context of the economic crisis the rest of us are going through. But there's only 1,000 billionaires, but they have the power to crush a popular policy like a billionaires tax, even though so few Americans would be affected by such a thing, and it would inure to the benefit of so many of us. That's exactly the problem.
I don't know that soaking our very richest Americans even more is a long-term solution.
All right, Robby, pour one out for the billionaires as always.
We'll just confiscate their wealth and put them in show
Make them pay their fair share, yes. They should pay as much in taxes as their secretaries do.
They do pay way more than their secretaries.
Zero in taxes. Jeff Bezos paid zero in taxes.
All right, more rising right after this.